So our next speaker is a man that needs no introduction, nothing else to say about him. It's Mark Kumpf, and he's speaking on BSL, or breed-specific legislation. Thank you, Mark.
Okay, hopefully I'll be able to make sure everything works all right here, and the electronics and the technology will cooperate, and we'll race through this. Exactly how much time do I have this afternoon? Nothing. See, I get people that listen. It's awesome. Well, coming from, stop that. I don't want presenter view. I just want to start from the beginning. Thank you. Cool. There we go. Coming from the state of Ohio in the wonderful world of the United States, we have, for the last 25 years, since I believe 1987 or so, had breed-specific legislation on the books. And in Ohio, that meant that pit bulls and pit bull types, by nature of being born, were deemed vicious or dangerous without any other predicate act. The only person in Ohio that could determine what a dangerous or vicious pit bull looked like was our locally appointed dog warden, me. Not an animal behaviorist, not a veterinarian, not someone who'd been to school, anybody with any scientific background, but an individual that was appointed as the local dog warden. And if you go back 25 years, the qualifications for being the local dog warden meant you were breeding and you could potentially drive a vehicle. They handed you a set of keys, a catch pole, a leash, a citation book, and told you to go out and go do good deeds. And these were the people that were making decisions in life and death over people's animals. Well, BSL came about as a result of a bad situation. Again, knee-jerk legislation that was passed in Ohio that was poorly constructed, as we found out shortly thereafter, when the majority of that actual act was deemed to be unconstitutional. It did not afford dog owners the right to appeal the decision. It didn't give them any due process. So essentially what happened is their dog was sentenced, found guilty by the dog warden, and that was the end of the matter. Now, I need to make it clear that this wasn't a breed ban. No one said you couldn't have a pit bull or a pit bull type. It simply said that the dog by nature was vicious, and little things like insurance companies not wishing to give you homeowners protection, apartment complexes not wanting you to live in their neighborhoods, those types of hurdles made it very difficult for folks who were responsible to own pit bull types. And then you did have certain localities, emboldened by the state legislation, actually passing bans within their jurisdiction. So a lot of this was driven by the media. It wasn't driven by science. It wasn't driven by fact. It was driven by fear. And as I'm sure all of you understand, fear is a huge motivator for the human species. If we're scared of it, we try and legislate it out of existence. We run from it. In some cases, we hide from it, or we fight it head on. Doesn't matter whether that fear is justified or not. I refer to BSL sometimes as bad science legislation, and we'll talk a little bit about more what that means, but we also want to look at some ways forward. What I found about a year ago, and this is long after I realized that this legislation was bad, is that we're suffering this not just here in Australia, but all over the United States. And there was a particular case that was going on in Belfast. Some of you may be familiar with a dog named Lennox by chance. Recent events in Belfast demonstrated once again that breed-specific legislation provides no protection to the public or the animals that the government supporters who cling to this type of legislation vouch for that it provides. Their city council was fortified by dubious expert testimony, and under some questionable circumstances in that particular city, they spent almost 2 years holding a dog to have it declared dangerous and later euthanized. They spent that legal wrangling in a vacuum. Unfortunately, this dog had bitten no one, had never exhibited any dangerous or vicious behavior, and in a country where arguably they've had plenty of strife in previous times where people were simply labeled for living in the wrong neighborhood or following the wrong religion, it really was an evidence of the same hatred and discrimination, using nothing to strongly justify what they did. As an animal control officer and a professional in this field of more than 20 years, I've dealt with many dangerous dog cases, many vicious dog cases, and I've dealt with dogs which well and truly deserve that title based on what they did. Even in those cases, we have alternatives, and as we talk about ways forward, there's always a potential that a dog may be rehabilitated, rehomed, placed with a permanent sanctuary. In some cases, even after an order of euthanasia has been entered, they can get a call from the governor that basically says, no, we've decided that this dog's going to get another chance or another opportunity. Dogs which have bitten or maimed people, caused serious disfigurement, or even taken lives arguably shouldn't be afforded this opportunity. However, in Belfast, that wasn't the case. Absent any of those deeds, the Belfast Council relied upon the animal behaviorist equivalent of the prophet Cassandra, and they were going to predict the future behavior of this dog. I would say would that their expert had been found guilty by Apollo and had their judgment passed that their predictions would never be observed. Unfortunately, this person wasn't ignored, and what was even more chilling is that this dog spent 2 years in the functional equivalent of solitary confinement without visits from family, other behaviorists, or any outside ability for folks to neutrally state what was going on. The family was denied even receiving the remains after the animal was euthanized, and there was no transparency. At the end, there was even a question as to whether or not the dog had actually survived the time in custody, or if the Belfast Council had simply denied them access to see how poorly the animal may have been treated. All these are conjectures because we'll never know. So when we talk about breed-specific legislation, we also have to consider what it does to the community. In that particular case, there were threats made against the dog wardens and the city council. None of that was ever attributed to the dog owners, but a lot of folks with a passion can get very upset over issues. And one thing I talk about when I deal with folks in breed-specific matters is we need to leave the passion in some cases at the door and try and look at the science. Why is the media interested in this? Because more than 50% of our population owns pets. Animal stories draw viewers. If it bleeds, it leads. And in many cases, when we see the press claiming a dog is a pit bull or a pit bull type, even when you can clearly see, for example, it's a Cocker Spaniel, they don't publish a retraction 2 days later and go, oh, we made a mistake, because it was for news or headlines. And breed-specific stuff, seriously, if you look at the media, pit bull bite, covered by the news. Labrador bite, do we have a Labrador bite? What kind of news coverage do we get? Nothing. This was our situation in the city of Dayton. News article from our local daily newspaper, Pit Bulls at the Center of a Vicious Dog Debate. One of our state representatives had decided that they were going to bring legislation forward that removed dangerous dogs, pit bull types, from that particular designation. And this went all the way up to our state Supreme Court, was heard by our national Supreme Court, who denied to hear the actual ruling on the original unconstitutional legislation. But as we went forward, they determined that dog wardens had to have some viable legislation. In the end, House Bill 14 passed, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, but we removed pit bull and pit bull types from the dangerous and vicious legislation definition.
Not allowed on the beaches or in the parks outside certain
Good video
hours.
from Australia.
So how is it that these two are roaming their neighbourhood, frightening the locals, and the council isn't stopping it?
Now, yesterday morning, I came out into the front yard and the dogs were across the road. And as soon as they saw me, they came bounding over. And I just made it into the front door in time.
Ray Graham is a
That's what the media covers. That's 9 News here. I thought that was really cute because the gentleman there, he does a really good dangerous dog impersonation, doesn't he? Doesn't matter what breed you're dealing with, this is what the media goes to. People who have little education, little knowledge about the subject, and these are the folks sometimes that our legislators are relying upon for their facts and their science. Isn't that scary? Very. Bad science legislation. There are no true genetic markers for mixed breeds. The original legislation in many cases and some of the evaluations, and I've seen some of these forms, the dog shall be of this size, its head shall be this wide, the ears shall look like this. We used to have that in medical science for humans back in the 1800s. It was called phrenology. And we thought we could read the bumps on our heads and determine what the ailment was that we were suffering from, or if we were going to be insane. I've been rubbing my head all morning, and you know what? I can't tell a darn thing out of this. But that's the type of evaluation folks are using. They're simply looking at something, and the scientific studies have shown we get it wrong lots of the time. In fact, almost every time. Often cited facts have no basis in actual studies. The unfortunate reality is that this information is incorrect, but it's what's being peddled to folks to deal with the legislation. They talk about bite force studies, none of which are actually pertain to the situation at hand. Oftentimes, our United States Center for Disease Control bite report fatality study is cited as a resource, even when that study in its own body of data says do not rely on this because the breed definitions and the breed descriptions are most likely wrong. Organizations and alarmist blogs come up and talk about how every bite is dangerous. I have a bloggist in Ohio that thinks that every pit bull attack that happens worldwide is my personal fault. Seriously, every single news media report, and Montgomery County Dog Warden Mark Kumpf is responsible for the fact that a pit bull bit somebody in Florida. Gotta love it. The costs, BSL's enacted as a knee-jerk reaction. Are Rottweilers banned in Australia? You know, you've had 4 people killed by Rottweilers since 1995 in Australia, but you haven't banned Rottweilers? What's wrong with you people? How about Siberian Huskies? You banned any of those lately? They've killed people in Australia as well. They're not banned. These lengthy legal battles cost local councils literally hundreds of thousands of dollars. They generate international media attention. And believe me, everybody's laughing at all of us when they talk about BSL. It's not just Australia. When we have breed bans in the U.S., you know, the educated folks look at it and go, are you kidding me? You spent $200,000 on what? Do you know how many dogs we could have fixed for that? The impact on the families is terrible because oftentimes pets are removed from homes with absolutely no justification. That unequal application, when I talk about other breeds that kill, again, looking at Australia's figures, Rottweilers, Huskies, cattle dogs, Great Danes, Shepherd, and Mastiff crosses have all been involved in human-related fatalities. However, there's no legislation on the books that bans or restricts any of these breeds. But we ban dogs that are imported from other countries and dogs for how they look. Somebody explain that to me. It doesn't quite make sense. How do we move forward? First of all, we educate folks. We look for breed ambassadors, examples of the breed that will give people a different impression, one that the media hasn't promulgated over a number of years. And we look for BNL, breed neutral legislation. Educational targets include the general public, our media, our elected officials, our legislators, and our policymakers. These are the folks we have to influence. These are the minds we have to change. And the images we have to give them are not ones of dogs attacking people. We have to give them positive images and animals going into good homes. There are literally, I'm sure in Australia, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of responsible owners whose dog, if it was evaluated by someone, might be part pit bull. If these were the terrible, vicious, horrible dogs that everybody says they are, we would have hundreds of people dying every day from these attacks. It's not happening. When the law changed in Ohio, people said, oh, your dog attacks are going to go up. You're going to see this. It's going to be terrible. The dog fighters are going to come into the shelters and want to adopt these animals. No, they're not, and no, it hasn't. You know, no dog fighter wants a dog without testicles. I'm sorry. He wants a dog that's going to fight, and a dog without testicles is not a manly enough dog for a dog fighter. And who wants to go into a shelter and give your details to the law enforcement officer and go, you got any dogs that like to fight? Oh, where do you live again? We're coming to your house. We need to talk to the media because, again, we want to give them positive stories. They still need to portray something, so let's give them something. The elected officials, the legislators, the policymakers, these individuals need to have access to accurate information that is neutral, unbiased, and in some cases, dispassionate. It's fine to be concerned, it's fine to care, but if you show up at the legislature and you parade your dog around and you look terrible and you say how this is a horrible outrage and you don't explain to them the financial and the legal impact on your citizens, you're not going to get very much mileage. We need to provide fact sheets, be direct, and have outside experts that we can bring in. And we need to reach out before incidents occur. After the latest dog attack is not the time to try and convince your media or elected officials that this isn't a problem. You need to get to them beforehand so that you can look at the actual circumstances of the situation and not the breed. Be at those public awareness events. Make things, obvious to folks by educating them beforehand. Those breed ambassadors we're talking about, these need to be well-socialized companion animals. You need to have good behavioral assessment programs. Do everything you can to make sure that if you are potentially placing a bully breed for adoption, just like any other dog in your facility, you've done an excellent job of pre-screening. You heard me say before, no one is truly Cassandra. We can't predict how every dog will behave once it gets into a home, but we can make a good guess. And we need to be honest with folks that that is a guess. It's not a guarantee. We need to include these animals in our public awareness events, take them to our off-site adoptions, make sure they're on our adoption floors, and treat them as a dog is a dog is a dog. We don't need to give them preferential treatment. We don't need to give them less special treatment. We need to treat them equally. Planned media exposure is helpful in that having them come to the shelter and see wonderful dogs you have up for adoption. That doesn't mean you show them 12 pit bulls in the adoption floor. It means you show them 12 dogs and 1 or 2 of them may be pit bulls, and you don't refer to this dog as, oh, this is a pit bull. It's, oh, this is one of the dogs we have available for adoption. That's Billy Ray, this is Stevie, this is Bob. They're dogs that are here. And when I talk to the media, one of the jokes that I have with my county administrators, I never use the word pit bull in an interview. Haven't yet. She thinks it's hysterical. She goes, did you get interviewed yesterday? Yep. Did you say pit bull? Nope. She goes, I'm going to watch. If you said it, they'll put it up there. Absolutely. Doesn't happen. When we talk about breed neutral legislation, we need to advocate for responsible, enforceable regulation that holds the owner responsible. The owner is the person that can be criminally negligent. The owner is the person that could potentially be fined. The owner is the person that can potentially face any other type of legal action and legal consequences. Usually with the dog, what's the only outcome of a dangerous or a vicious dog determination? Euthanasia, correct? Majority of the cases, the dog dies. What would it be like if we had the death penalty for jaywalking? I'd have been arrested and killed the first day I got here. Speeding, oh, that's it, off with your head. It doesn't make sense in our legal world for people. Why should it make sense in the legal world for our animals? And again, if a dog acts out and creates a situation, attacks somebody, the owner is completely negligent, they're responsible, and it's happened before, yes, that may be a potential outcome, but it shouldn't be a guaranteed outcome just because it was born. It also needs to clearly define the deed and those deed-based violations. No nebulous descriptions. You need to have what constitutes a dangerous dog, what constitutes a vicious dog. One that doesn't rely on appearance. Stock phrases when we talk with the media and we talk with folks. All dogs have the potential to be aggressive, not just one breed. How many people here realize that Jack Russell Terriers can be some of the scariest dogs on the face of the earth? I have 2. My dog's been quarantined. When I had workers at my house, one of the blokes approached the dog after being told, don't approach the dog if you see him. Went up, my dog's blind. He's afraid of fast-moving things in front of his face, and he jumped up and he nipped the guy. Okay? No, he didn't require 100 stitches. He didn't lose his finger in the attack. He had a little nip on his finger. I'm the dog warden. Do you know how bad it was having to have my senior officer come out and do a quarantine and a dog bite report at my house? But you do it, and you're honest and you're transparent about it. When we talk to folks, we see our agency focuses on the facts and the evidence in these cases. We don't let emotion get in the way. We have a job to do. And if we simply react out of fear or some misguided sense of passion or direction, we'll miss the facts. And the facts are the important things here. Stock phrases in our investigation: when the news wants to know what's going on, we have a great way of saying absolutely nothing. Our investigation is ongoing. Once concluded and presented to our prosecutor, we may be in a position to share additional information. Translate: no comment. We don't say anything. Why? Because we're not going to feed the fear. If we have facts and we have information, if someone ends up being charged with a crime or a criminal offense, or we seize an animal, we provide open and honest information. We didn't seize it because it was a pit bull. We seized it because the dog bit, severely injured, maimed, or disfigured a person and is being held pending a court's determination as to what the outcome for that animal should be. Are you going to euthanize the dog? The dog is being held pending a court's determination as to what that outcome should be. But are you going to euthanize the dog? The dog is being held, and you sound like a broken record, okay? You give them the information that's factual. You don't give them something, so if it bleeds, it leads. Sometimes when we're asked questions, we simply say we have many wonderful dogs and cats available for adoption here at our local animal shelter. Well, how many pit bulls do you have? We have many wonderful dogs and cats available for adoption here at our local animal shelter. We have the best ambassadors ready to join your family. Again, we're not going to feed the fear. It can work. In Ohio, as I mentioned, our breed-specific law was superseded by House Bill 14. You can visit the Ohio State Legislature's website and read the text of that legislation. It repealed the technical breed ban that was in place in many places simply because it said pit bulls were no longer dangerous and vicious by statute. And because those local ordinances and those local agencies mirrored our state law exactly, they had to change their law. So boom, No more breed bans. A lot of localities across the United States are repealing breed bans because it's just bad ideas. It's a very costly piece of legislation. And most recently, a petition forwarded to the White House resulted in our president coming out saying that breed-specific legislation is a bad idea. That's the President of the United States that's taken a position on BSL. I don't know, and sometimes I don't agree with some of his other positions, but on this particular position, I think we're both in agreement. BSL is bad science and it's bad legislation. They're even potentially considering in the UK whether or not the Dangerous Dog Act is going to continue to be viable. This is legislation that's resulted in the seizure and euthanasia of hundreds of dogs across the United Kingdom. It's bad law, and people are realizing that it's bad law. Basically, a dog is a dog is a dog. And if you take nothing more away from this, no dog should be killed because of how it looks. No dog should suffer and die just for being born. And every dog deserves to be evaluated on its deeds only, not its looks. For animal services officers, this is a situation where we're not the enemy. We often are scapegoated, and we should not be, for failed policy which is based on sensationalistic fear-mongering perpetuated by uneducated legislators and the media. We often get the blame because we're the ones there with the catch pole taking the dog because of a law. For 7 years in Ohio as a dog warden, where we had BSL on the books, my officers and my staff, we ended up picking up dogs. We didn't go out and sneak into people's backyards. We didn't keep our catch rates up on the wall. We simply did what was required professionally under the law. If someone's pit bull got out, they received a citation for failure to confine the breed. We didn't refuse to return their dog to them. We didn't label them, anything other than an irresponsible dog owner in a one-off situation. We did our job. My personal opinion didn't hold a lot of sway in that because I had a job to do, but I diligently showed up at the legislature, and I didn't testify on behalf of pit bulls. I testified on behalf of good legislation, legislation that addressed the deed. I talked about how the revenue that we were losing because people were afraid to register their dogs. 20,000 dog licenses weren't sold in my county because people didn't want to register their dogs for fear that something bad would happen to them and their animal. The majority of those folks, perfectly responsible dog owners. And folks wouldn't come redeem their animals from the shelter for the same reason. They thought they were going to be arrested and thrown in jail. Their dogs ended up euthanized because no one reclaimed them. Well, the law changed, and you know what? My reclaim rate's gone up 20%. My euthanasia rate has dropped 15%. I have over 1,000 dogs now each year that go through my behavior and temperament and medical evaluation system that go up for adoption because a dog is a dog is a dog. If you have BSL in your jurisdiction or you're an advocate for this particular failed practice, I have sympathy for you. The change is coming. We've seen it in animal welfare, and the animal welfare officers aren't the problem. The animal activists aren't the problem. Bad legislation's the problem. And hopefully, in my lifetime, we'll see it go away because no dog ever, regardless of breed, should be punished because of the way it looks. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.